Welcome back, Christopher here. Today, I'm talking about people who were eaten alive inside their car. From a family stranded in a lion reserve with a window that won't fully close, to a truck driver who parks for lunch at a pull-off a bear had been returning to for weeks. But first, let's start with that family in South Africa who took a self-drive safari with no guide, no experience, and no backup. It was March 14th, 2015. A private game reserve in South Africa's Limpopo region. Open grassland, scattered acacia trees, the kind of place that looks peaceful from inside a vehicle. The road is unpaved, dusty, and long. Cell signal disappears past the main gate. Darvel Ose was 38, a logistics coordinator from outside Johannesburg who had saved nearly 2 years for this trip. His wife Priya, their teenage son, and their 13-year-old daughter Nami were all with him. He'd booked a self-drive package, signed a liability waiver, sat through a basic orientation at the gate, and that was it. No guide, no escort, no backup, zero prior safari experience. But he was confident. That confidence is what made this trip dangerous before it even started. The reserve sits in a semi-arid bushveld zone where mid-March temperatures regularly hit 97 degrees Fahrenheit by early afternoon. Predator activity peaks in the late morning and again near dusk. The road Darvel was on cuts through the southern section, territory shared by at least 2 resident lion prides. About 40 minutes into the drive, the engine cut out. Overheated, a known issue with that specific rental unit that nobody mentioned at check-in. He tried restarting it. Nothing. Priya checked her phone. No signal. They sat in the heat waiting for something to change. No sounds, no movement, just heat and the occasional creak of the cooling engine. At some point, the family stopped talking altogether. Here's the detail that changes everything. The rear passenger window on Nami's side had a broken regulator. It wouldn't stay up on its own, and in the heat with the engine off, Darvel had lowered it about halfway to give her air, maybe 10 to 11 inches of open glass. Darvel had been meaning to raise it back up. The orientation had one rule above everything else. Stay in the vehicle. Keep windows closed. It was on the laminated sheet clipped to the sun visor. He had read it. He just hadn't acted on it. 20 minutes after the engine died, shapes appeared in the grass about 60 feet out. 5 lionesses and 2 younger males. They approached without urgency. No stalking, no aggression, just slow curiosity. One climbed onto the hood. The family stayed completely still. For the next 8 minutes, the pride worked the vehicle the way they work anything unfamiliar. One lioness pressed her face flat against the driver's side glass. Another mouthed the front tire, then lost interest. A third dragged its jaw slowly along the door seams, drawn by salt from handprints, human scent baked into the exterior. The family watched without making a sound. It didn't look like predation. It looked like investigation. That distinction would not save them. One of the younger males drifted toward the rear passenger side. The window was already most of the way down. He pressed his nose along the door, then rose up on his forelimbs and pushed his head through the opening, not forcing anything, just following the gap that was already there. Nami was sitting right there. She flinched back against the seat. That movement, that sudden shift, was enough. What happened next took less than 4 seconds. The lion bit down on her left shoulder and the left side of her neck simultaneously and pulled. Priya grabbed her daughter's legs. Darvel threw himself into the back seat. Their son pressed against the opposite door, hands over his ears, not looking. The grip didn't release. Nami was pulled through to her waist before the lion repositioned its bite to her upper neck, severing the vessels on the left side. She was fully outside within seconds. Darvel found the emergency beacon clipped to the dash and activated it. The pride didn't scatter. The male moved into the grass with Nami. The others stayed around the SUV, pressing against the doors, moving along the perimeter, for another 22 minutes before drifting off. The beacon was transmitting. Help was coming. He just didn't know when. A reserve response team reached them 47 minutes later. Nami's body was recovered about 35 feet into the grass. She had been dead within minutes of being pulled out. The post-mortem confirmed exsanguination from lacerations to the left carotid artery and jugular vein. The lowered window and the absence of a guide were both listed as contributing factors. The case was closed as a fatal animal attack. Nami was 13 years old, and her death came down to two things: a window left open in the heat and a vehicle that wouldn't start. Up next, what happens when a grizzly bear is already watching before you even open the door? It was September 3rd, 2016. Logging roads in British Columbia's Central Forest don't have names, they have numbers. Road 7C runs about 22 miles through dense second-growth forest before it dead ends at an old decommissioned mill site. No traffic, no signal, no nothing. Just trees, dirt, and whatever's living in them. Donald Frey had been working these interior logging routes for nearly 15 years, 44 years old. Timber surveyor, the kind of guy who knew every bend in these roads by feel. That day, he had a trainee with him, Thomas Weld, 27, 3 weeks into the job. Standard crew cab pickup, survey equipment in the bed, two-way radio sitting on the center console. Drive to the 14-mile marker, survey a section of tree line, back on the main road before dark. That was the whole plan. Here's something worth knowing about grizzly bears in early September. They're in hyperphagia, a pre-hibernation eating phase where a single bear can put down up to 20,000 calories a day. They're covering huge distances, focused on food, and not in the mood to be surprised. Adult males in this region weigh anywhere between 400 and 790 pounds. Their bite force exceeds 1,200 pounds per square inch, among the highest of any land predator in North America, and they can cover 40 feet in under 2 seconds. I always think about that last one. 2 seconds is genuinely nothing. Donald had worked these roads long enough to know bears were out there. You see tracks, you see scat, you learn to read the signs. But hyperphagia season on a blocked road with no way to turn around, that's a different situation entirely. Did he even think about it when he rolled down the window? About 9 miles in, a large Douglas fir had come down across the road, probably within the last day or so. Trunk was too wide to drive over. Donald pulled the truck to a stop and left the engine running. He rolled down the driver's side window and leaned out to get a better look at the trunk, trying to figure out how. Much of it they'd need to clear to get through. The two-way sat on the console between them, untouched. Thomas stayed in the passenger seat. For a minute, it was just a normal problem on a normal day. Blocked road, figure out the plan, move on. Neither of them had any reason to look at the tree line. The bear was already in the undergrowth on the left side of the road. It had likely been there before the truck even stopped. It came out fast, no warning, no sound. It covered the distance between the tree line and the truck in under 3 seconds. The first contact was a grab to Donald's upper arm and shoulder as he leaned out, the bear seizing whatever was closest and most exposed. The force of it wrenched Donald sideways and forward, twisting him out of his seat and pulling his upper body further through the window. That repositioning is what exposed the back of his skull. The bear bit down there with full force. Thomas later told responders he heard a crack he thought was a branch. It wasn't. The bear bit again and dragged Donald fully out through the window opening, pulling him down onto the ground alongside the truck. Thomas didn't move. Couldn't. He sat in the passenger seat, door locked, engine still running, watching through the side window as the bear mauled, biting, shaking, repositioning, maybe 3 feet away from him. It went on for roughly 6 minutes before Thomas finally reached across and held down the horn. The bear paused, looked up, and moved back into the tree line. 6 minutes. I don't even know how you process something like that. Thomas found the two-way on the center console and got through on the emergency channel. He couldn't give an exact location, just the road number, no mile marker. A response team was dispatched, but the fallen tree was blocking road access, and a second vehicle with a winch had to be brought in first. Total response time was 1 hour and 54 minutes. Donald was found on the ground beside the truck, below the driver's side window. The post-mortem identified a depressed skull fracture to the rear of the cranium, with traumatic brain injury as the primary cause of death, along with drag lacerations to the right shoulder and upper back. Death was estimated within minutes of the initial strike. The bear was never located. Thomas Weld left the industry within the year. He never gave a formal interview about what he saw through that window, and nobody who knew him well ever pushed him on it. A grizzly came out of the tree line while Donald was leaning out of his own window, and that was the end of it. Deep in the scrublands of Rajasthan, a contractor spends 2 days repairing a fence that's the only thing separating him from one of the most dangerous predators on the planet. It was January 22nd, 2014. The boundary fence of a private tiger reserve in Rajasthan runs for miles through flat, scrub-covered terrain that looks almost identical on both sides of the wire. Dry land, sparse vegetation, cracked soil. On one side, a service road used by contractors and utility workers. On the other side, a completely different story. Most people who took jobs like this didn't think twice about it. You show up, you fix what's broken, you go home. That's exactly how Dustin Ferris saw it. 51 years old, self-employed, spent most of his career doing agricultural fencing and livestock enclosures. Straightforward work, and he was good at it. This job came through a local labor broker. Repair a damaged section of the reserve's outer boundary. Work through a list of compromised posts, done in 3 days. He was given a basic site map and sent out alone. No supervisor, no partner, no check-in system. Just him. A white utility van loaded with tools and wire spools, and a fence that needed fixing. Except this wasn't a cattle farm, and that fence wasn't keeping cows in. Before we get into what happened, Bengal tigers. Adult males weigh between 400 and 570 pounds and stretch over 9 feet from nose to tail. Their bite force sits around 1,050 pounds per square inch, and their preferred kill method on large prey is a throat clamp. They bite down and hold until the animal stops breathing. Tigers are also known to pace fence lines, especially where prey animals gather near the boundary. And here's the part that really matters. A tiger that sees regular human activity along a fence line will start to clock it. The routine, the timing, the pattern. They're not just wandering around. They're paying attention. Dustin was out there alone every day for 2 days, and nothing happened. No sounds from the other side, no movement along the fence. Just dry heat and quiet. That kind of quiet can make you comfortable very fast. And out here, that's the last thing you want to be. On his first morning, he spotted fresh paw prints running along the inside of the fence. He didn't report them. Didn't think much of it. Or maybe didn't want to make a fuss on a new job. Either way, he went back the next day, and the day after that. He had 2 days of uneventful work behind him. The job was almost done. Maybe that's why the paw prints didn't feel urgent. When nothing has gone wrong yet, it's hard to imagine that it will. On the morning of the 22nd, he parked the van along the fence near the 3-mile marker. He slid the side door open, sat on the edge of the van floor with his measuring tape and tools around him, and began working on a leaning post from there, close enough to reach it without fully stepping out. It was just easier that way. The van's side door stayed open behind him. Think about what that looks like from the other side of the fence. A man sitting still in an open doorway. Same spot, same time, 3rd morning in a row. The tiger had been in the scrub on the other side of the fence, less than 20 feet away. There was a gap where 2 fence panels had separated, wide enough. It cleared that gap in a single movement. Dustin was sitting in the open doorway. The van, when it hit him, no time to react, no time to stand. The tiger seized him by the upper chest and throat simultaneously, 1 bite, full compression, and pulled him out of the van doorway in a single drag. His measuring tape was still in his hand when he was found. The van sat there with the side door open for the rest of the day. The radio on the dashboard kept transmitting on an open channel. Nobody was monitoring it. Nobody knew anything was wrong until Dustin didn't show up at the staging area that evening. A check-in call went unanswered. They assumed he'd gone home early. The following morning, a 2-person team drove out to find him. Van exactly where he'd left it. Side door open. Tools scattered on the floor. Radio still going. Dustin's body was recovered, 40 feet inside the fence line, partially consumed. The post-mortem confirmed asphyxiation from throat compression as the cause of death. with hemorrhage from the neck and upper chest as a contributing factor. The measuring tape was recovered at the point of initial contact, and the fence gap was documented. The labor broker was investigated for failing to brief workers on the risks of operating near the boundary, but no criminal charges were filed. The tiger was identified through paw print measurements cross-referenced with the reserve's animal records and was not removed. Dustin had been dead for nearly 30 hours before anyone found him. He showed up for day 3 of a routine job, and the tiger that had been watching him came through the same gap he was hired to fix. Miles away in central Kenya, a couple pulls over for the night, and something moving through the dark finds its way in through the roof. It was July 9th, 2017. The Laikipia Plateau in central Kenya isn't the kind of place most people picture when they think safari. No organized tours, no game vehicles, no rangers on standby. Just a long corrugated dirt road that cuts through open scrubland, sharp turns, and stretches where you won't see another vehicle for hours. By late afternoon, the light drops fast. What was 88 degrees Fahrenheit at noon becomes 61 degrees Fahrenheit by 7 p.m. It gets dark quickly out there, and when it does, the plateau belongs to something else entirely. Matt Faro wasn't a safari guy. 33 years old, agricultural equipment salesman based out of Nairobi, had driven the plateau road a couple of times before with friends and figured he knew it well enough. That long weekend, he had his girlfriend with him, Kella Beckett, 29, a school teacher. No formal itinerary, just a long weekend away from the city. They were in Matt's personal Jeep, a used one with a manual sunroof latch he'd been meaning to fix for a while. The plan was to reach a campsite near the northern end of the plateau and drive back Sunday morning. Now here's what most people don't know about leopards. They're the smallest of the African big cats. Adult males weigh between 130 and 200 pounds. But don't let that fool you. Pound Chaisiate. For pound, they are arguably the strongest predator on the continent. A leopard can haul prey heavier than itself straight up into a tree. Their attack style is nothing like a lion or a tiger. No prolonged stalk, no chase. They close distance in near silence, and they're on you before you even register movement. They're also completely comfortable at height. Rooftops, tree branches, elevated ledges. A leopard treats all of it the same way. That detail matters here. The Jeep stalled at around 6:40 p.m., about 11 miles short of the campsite. Matt tried restarting it several times. The engine turned over, but wouldn't catch. Fuel line issue he'd been putting off for weeks. They were stopped on a flat section of road with low acacia scrub on both sides. Kella suggested waiting until morning. Matt agreed. They reclined their seats, and Matt pushed the sunroof open about 3 inches for air. The interior was still warm from the day. When he pushed it back, the latch didn't re-engage. He assumed it had caught. It hadn't. The temperature dropped steadily as the light went. Sometime around 8 p.m., Kella mentioned the Jeep felt colder than it should. Matt ran his hand along the sunroof panel. It shifted slightly under his palm, not flush with the frame. He pushed it, felt what he thought was resistance, and left it. It wasn't latched. I've been in situations where you assume something is fine and just move on. Most of the time, it is. This time, it wasn't. By 9 p.m., the plateau was completely dark and quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel restful. At some point between 9 and 10 p.m., a leopard moving through the scrub parallel to the road came across the Jeep. It approached, climbed onto the roof. The vehicle shifted slightly under the weight. The unsecured sunroof panel gave way under the leopard's forepaws and dropped inward, leaving an open gap directly above the front seats. What happened next is pieced together from physical evidence and Kyla's account because she was the only one who made it through the night. The leopard didn't drop in. It crouched at the opening, forepaws gripping the sunroof frame, head low over the gap, orienting to the interior, to the heat, to the scent. For a moment, nothing moved. Matt was in the driver's seat, directly below it. He looked up. That was the moment the leopard reached down through the opening and seized him, one forepaw hooking his shoulder, pulling him upward and off the seat. The second strike came to his throat. Kala was already reaching for her door handle. She got it open and ran before the third. No shoes, no phone, just ran. She covered about a quarter mile down the road before she stopped. Nearly 2 hours passed before a supply truck heading south came through and found her. Matt was found in the driver's seat, partially pulled toward the sunroof opening. The Leopard was gone. Kayla was treated for deep lacerations to her feet and was in no condition to speak to anyone that night. She gave a full account to investigators the following day. The case was ruled an accidental death by animal attack. The sunroof latch was examined and confirmed non-functional before the incident. The post-mortem listed cause of death as fatal hemorrhage from lacerations to the external jugular vein and deep puncture wounds to the chest wall. Death was estimated within 4 minutes of the first bite. A stalled Jeep and an unfixed latch. That's the entire reason Matt didn't make it home that night. Up in the boreal forests of northern Ontario, a truck driver pulls into a rest stop he'd used dozens of times before, not knowing a bear had already claimed it. It was August 27th, 2013. Highway 11 in northern Ontario is one of those roads that just goes on forever. Dense boreal forest on both sides, no towns for miles, and pull-offs every 20 or 30 miles. Gravel patches just wide enough for a truck to park. No lighting, no signage, no facilities. Just gaps in the tree. Line where drivers stop to eat, sleep, or wait out weather. Most of them are completely unremarkable. But in late summer, some of those pull-offs sit right on the edge of active bear foraging corridors, and the bears working those areas are not shy. Jack Doyle had been running long-haul routes through northern Ontario for 11 years. 49 years old, knew this stretch of Highway 11 the way most people know their own neighborhood. Every bend, every pull-off, every soft shoulder that gets muddy after rain. The pull-off at mile marker 218 was one he used regularly. Flat, well-drained, shaded. He'd eaten lunch there more times than he could count. Nothing had ever happened there. Why would it? What Jack didn't know was that a black bear had been returning to that exact pull-off repeatedly over the past several weeks. Food scraps left by other drivers had turned it into a reliable food source. And a bear that finds reliable food doesn't forget where it is. Here's the thing about black bears that most people get wrong. They're not considered man-eaters the way tigers or lions are, but fatal attacks do happen, and they follow a specific pattern. When a black bear attacks a human predatorily, it doesn't stop. It's not defensive. It's not a warning. It's feeding behavior. Adult males in northern Ontario weigh between 250 and 400 pounds in late summer when they're eating constantly. Their claws are non-retractable, built for digging and tearing, and a single strike can shatter a standard car window. Their sense of smell is roughly 7 times stronger than a bloodhound's. If there's food in your vehicle, they already know about it. Jack pulled into the mile 218 pull-off at around 1:15 p.m. Small cooler on the passenger seat. Sandwiches, leftover pasta, a couple of sodas. He cracked the passenger window about 2 inches, reclined his seat, ate one sandwich, set the cooler on the floor, and fell asleep. Completely normal. Something he'd done plenty of times on this exact route. A trail camera mounted on a tree at the edge of the pull-off, placed there by a local trapper, hadn't been checked in weeks, caught everything that happened next. At 2:08 p.m., the bear entered the pull-off, went straight to the passenger side of the truck, stood on its hind legs, and pressed its nose against the cracked window. Took maybe 30 seconds. Then it dropped to all fours, repositioned, and hit the passenger window with a single downward strike. The window shattered inward. Just like that, one hit. The bear forced its upper body through the opening. Jack woke up to it already inside the cab. He was struck across the abdomen by a single claw swipe before he could even sit up. Then the bear bit into his midsection. Multiple bites, repositioning each time. Jack's seatbelt was still fastened. He couldn't move laterally, couldn't get to the driver's side door in time. 11 minutes. Alone in a pull-off on an empty highway with no way to call for help. That's the whole picture. A passing motorist spotted the truck at the pull-off with what looked like an animal inside the cab and called for help from the next town, about 14 miles up the road. By the time a response unit arrived, 38 minutes after the call, the bear was already gone. Jack was found alive, but unresponsive, already in shock. The post-mortem identified hemorrhagic shock as the cause of death, lacerations to the small intestine, mesentery, and abdominal wall, with liver trauma from bite compression as a contributing factor. Jack's cooler, still containing food, was documented at the scene alongside the shattered window frame. Fur samples collected from the window frame identified the bear. It was located and euthanized 6 days later. The trail camera footage was pulled as the primary piece of evidence. It confirmed the bear had been inside the cab for roughly 11 minutes from the moment the window shattered. The case was ruled an accidental death by animal attack.